Hello everyone, it's Sarah and welcome to my crochet channel. Today's video is step number 2 in our winter crochet along. And again, we're going to be crocheting a Christmas puppy or kitty, whichever you prefer. We're going to begin with the head and the body of our Christmas puppy. And so we'll need to use our yarn, which we are using a chunky number 5 yarn. You're going to need your J hook, which is a 6.0 millimeter crochet hook. You'll need your needle with the bigger eye for weaving in ends, and you'll need a pair of scissors. And also, you'll need your stuffing, because once we get the head and body made, we're going to stuff it. Gather your supplies, and we'll get started. Don't forget to have your stitch marker handy. We're going to begin with a slip knot, and we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. We're going to place 6 single crochets in the second chain from the hook. 1, 2. So we'll go in, pull up a loop, yarn over, and go through both loops. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. We're going to join to that first single crochet with a slip stitch. And this is the only row that we're going to join. The rest of the rows we're going to just move around, stitching in the round. All right, so for row 1, we have 6 single crochets. Now before we start row 2, I want to go ahead and weave this end in. So I've got my needle with the big eye. I'm going to go ahead and pull that tail of yarn through. Take my hook out, because we want to close this hole that's in the top of our puppy's head. And so I'm just going to go around, close that up, and weave that in. There we go. And then I'll go ahead and clip that. I want to go ahead and do it now, because as we stitch the puppy's head, it'll be harder and harder to get up in there and weave that in. Now for row 2, we're going to go ahead and chain 1. And now we're going to place 2 single crochets in each of those 6. So we'll go right in that stitch and stitch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, let's move that stitch marker. There we go. 11 and 12. All right, let's put our stitch marker back in. This is our 12th stitch. Row 1 we had 6. Row 2 we have 12 single crochets. Now we're not going to stitch in that chain 1. We're going to go right to that first single crochet, and we're going to stitch 1 single crochet. All right, then in the next stitch we're going to stitch 2. 1, 2, 1 in the next, 2 in the next, 1 and 2, 1 in the next, and 2 single crochets in the next, 1 and 2, 1 in the next, 2 in the next, 1 and 2, 1, 1 and 2, 1. We'll take our stitch marker out, and in this last stitch we'll stitch 2 single crochets, 1 and 2. Then we'll stitch that stitch marker, or place that stitch marker right back in. We don't stitch it in. Okay, and so you can see the top of our head forming. So we had 6, then we had 12, and now for this row we have 18 single crochets. For row 4, we're going to stitch 1 single crochet in the first 2, 1, 2, and then 2 in the next, 1 and 2. Then we'll stitch 1 single crochet in the next 2, and 2 in the next. So we're doing 2 and 2. 1 single crochet in the next 2, and 2 single crochets in the next, 1 and 2. 1, 2, 1 single crochet in the next 2, and then 2 in the next. 1 single crochet in the next 2, and 2 in the next. 1 and 2. 1 single crochet in the next 2. Get some more yarn out here. And then we'll take our stitch marker out and stitch those 2 single crochets in that next stitch. 1 and 2, and then slide that stitch marker right back in that last stitch. Now, you may think you don't need a stitch marker, that you can keep count and keep track, but it's always better, in my own opinion, not to live dangerously and use a stitch marker. And that's how row 4 should look. For row 5, we're going to be stitching 1 single crochet in the next 3 and 2 in the next. So we'll start right away in that next single crochet. 1, 2, 3, and then 2 single crochets in the next. 1 and 2. So what we're doing is 3 and 2. 1, 2, 3, and then 2 in the next. 1 and 2. Oops. There we go. 1, 2, and 3, and 2 in the next. 1 and 2. 1, 2, 3, and 2 in the next. 1 and 2. 1, 2, 3, and 2 in the next. 1, 2, 1, 2. Oops, I keep sliding it out of there, huh? There's 3. We'll take out the stitch marker, stitch the last 2, 1 and 2, and slide that stitch marker back in to make sure we remember where that last stitch was on that row. Let me move that out a little bit there. There we go. So now we're on, or have completed, row 5. Now we're going to do row 6, and this is our last increase row. We're going to stitch 1 single crochet in the next 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 2 in the next. 1 and 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 2 in the next. 1 and 2. And you'll repeat this all the way back around to our stitch marker 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 in each of the next 4, and 2 in the next. Repeat all the way back around to our stitch marker. I've completed row 6, stitching 1 in the next 4 and then 2 in the next, and you should have at row 6 36 single crochets. We're not going to increase anymore. So what we're going to do for row 7 is we're just going to place 1 single crochet in each of the single crochets around. And you may notice that it looks a little pointed in places where we did our increased stitches. By stitching 1 single crochet in each of the single crochets around, it's going to help even that out. So don't worry if it's doing that, okay? That's what happens when we do those increased stitches. So for row 7, we're stitching 1 single crochet in each of the single crochets around. No more increases. So for row 7, we still have 36 single crochets because we didn't add or subtract any stitches. And what you're going to do now is you're going to repeat row 7 25 more times. You'll continue to stitch 1 single crochet in each single crochet around for 25 more rows. This is what your puppy's head and body will look like after you've done those additional 25 rows, and that will bring you up to row 32. Now, something that I do that helps me is I mark my last row up here, and then I do my additional rows, and I don't move that stitch marker. To me, it's easier to count from that stitch marker down than having to keep going all the way back up and counting from the top. It's just something that I do. If it works for you, that's fantastic. If it doesn't, then do something else. You have to do what works best for you. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and take that stitch marker out. And what we're going to do now is we're going to stuff it. So I'm going to push all the way up. We want to make sure we get a good amount in the head because we're going to be forming the head. All right, so we'll just stuff that in there. I might have too much here. Put a little bit more in. All right, now the reason we went with the J hook instead of a bigger hook for a chunky 5 is we didn't want the stuffing to be seen through the stitches. All right, and that's why we did it that way. All right, so now we're going to close the bottom of our head and body and then form the head for our Christmas puppy. You want to take the end and you want to put where you ended over to your side, okay? We want that to be on the side edge because we're going to stitch this closed. So we'll go in the stitch here and the stitch here, and we'll stitch a slip stitch. All right, so you go in the stitch on this side, you grab that yarn, you pull it through, and then pull that loop through the loop that's already on your hook. And this is closing up the bottom of our Christmas puppy or kitty. Make sure your stuffing doesn't come out. I've got mine pushed up pretty high, so. And you can see I'm almost out of yarn on this particular skein of yarn. But I'll have enough to finish the bottom. Alright, so I'm just going to stitch across. Looks like I missed it there. But we'll go ahead, I'm going to go ahead and stitch across, closing up the bottom of my puppy. and then I'll show you how to form the head of your puppy. I have stitched the bottom all the way across, closing it up with the slip stitches. I'm going to cut my yarn, tie that off, and I'm going to grab that needle with the bigger eye. There we go. And I'm going to weave that in. I'm going to make a couple stitches in this corner. And then I'm going to take that and I'm going to go inside and I'm going to wind it around some of that batting and just poke it through. And now that's going to stay put. Okay, so here's our bottom of our puppy. All right, now we're going to form the head. To form the head, I've threaded on a piece of yarn that's about 24 inches long. And we're going to count down to the 16th row. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And this is going to be the back of my puppy. All right. And so what we're going to do is we're going to first tie a little stay knot so that knot doesn't come undone. Okay. Now we're going to stitch in and out, gathering that up right along that row. I go about every 2 stitches. Make sure you stay on the same row. All right, now we're going to take this and we're going to gather it closed and do that gently so you don't break your yarn. And then we'll take this piece and wrap it around again and do the same thing. We don't want our head to come undone, so we're going to do this a couple of times. Make sure it's going to stay put. And you can do it as many times as you want to. And don't worry if it doesn't look neat and tidy right now, because we're going to be adding the collar and it's going to cover that up. All right. Let me pull the camera out so you can see what it looks like. So this is what the body and the head of my Christmas puppy or kitty looks like. All right. Now that's the end of step 2. Step 3, we're going to stitch the arms and the legs, or since it's a pet, 4 legs. We'll make those, stuff those, and add those to the body of our Christmas pet. See you in step 3.